right, so I'm going to start by getting into the final project. I chose a short story for mine, the story title being The Amplification of Silence. Um, it is an original short story by me. I focus more on aspects of my life. I really feel like a personal connection to your story helps to bring out some more influence and kind of can bring out some of those themes and symbolism, um, and kind of tell the story a little bit better and from a more authentic state, especially with how emotionally driven this one is and personal to me. So let's get into it. Taking a look, we'll start with the themes of race and gender. This short story really does explore the intersection of race and gender through my personal lived experiences, and it kind of puts that into somebody that resembles someone like me. So it's a mixed Black and Mexican male narrator. We don't get a name. He's just kind of recounting his stories from what he's lived through, and how those stories get triggered through a music response. And it kind of really tells how you have those masculinity expectations, especially from the Mexican side and the machismo culture. And then from the Black side, you kind of get to see how those racial ties to being in the middle of America, where I'm from, especially in affluent neighborhoods, you kind of get that issue of not really fitting in either way. And there's not really anybody that looks like you for you to be able to kind of bounce those feelings off of and to kind of gain control of the situation. And so the narrator tries to navigate that via code switching and kind of switching between the two to kind of get a sense of, belonging. But that doesn't really happen until the end of the story, where it finishes up. I don't want to give it away, but we'll kind of get into that here in a little bit. Themes of race and gender continued here. Gender emerges through emotional restraint and anger. The narrator does learn that vulnerability is kind of discouraged from, anger, and really he finds that release in emotional outbursts, and kind of um, looks to that to feel some sense of power and control in his life. Um, Meanwhile, you also have the cultural pressures that are intersecting with those racialized experiences, and shaping that masculinity, not only as inherently toxic, but it's constrained even by the expectations and fear of deviation. You don't want to be away from what the norm is if you're away from the norm, then you're not going to fit in. So trying your best to fit within the society that you're in. We'll move into the message and social commentary here. The primary message here is that silence is not always passive. Throughout the narrator's life, you see these moments where uh, making that commentary first. It's always having to say something. And throughout this racial isolation that he feels from his relationship ending, and as well as the cultural expectation and gender norms that that he feels um, bound to, I should say. Uh, you kind of get these moments where he learns over time that reclaiming his silence and being more passive is a way to regain power for him, and as well as be able to withdraw from situations that don't require him to have such an emotional outburst. So the story does critique the burden that's placed on mixed identity kids, and I do feel like this is a really important story to tell as we see more mixed identity children pop up. We're becoming more of a melting pot, especially here in America, where you do see the blending of several cultures in different children. So it's really important as it does challenge that need to perform. or for performance to validate your identity and to be under these certain gender or racial norms as we do see them. So, and it does argue that being quiet can be a little bit better. Let's see. The story is framed by, sorry, well, let's get into the plot overview here. So, the story is framed by an adult narrator driving through San Antonio as music uh, in the car kind of triggers his memories. I kind of think, all right, sorry about that brief break there. I wasn't feeling well for a minute, so just wanted to step away real briefly. All right. So the story is framed by an adult narrator driving through San Antonio as music is on the radio, and it kind of triggers those memories. That's really how things work for me. I really feel like music is such an important part of my life, and one of those artists that really kind of drives that home is Kid Cudi. So when I listen to him, I start feeling that loneliness, some of those sentimental values that I had back when I was a middle school. And it starts bringing me back to middle school really, and it takes me to this point where um, you know I start having my first relationships and so I kind of bring those stories in too. So one of those stories, it goes through for our main character where he goes and returns to this middle school relationship that he had, where the narrator feels betrayed because their significant other ends their fling, or in middle school it's not necessarily serious dating, but whatever relationship that he had that he felt was significant was ended because her father disagrees with her dating a black person. So, the pain that comes from that, and the wanting to belong and not belonging is such an um, emotional feeling, especially when you're first discovering those feelings of love. So, another memory that flashes in there as well is a visit with his wife's family in Mexico, where he gets ridiculed over a pink shirt. That kind of reinforces those machismo expectations that they have of being the strong man and dominant colors, and don't relate anything to femininity. Is that seen as a weakness or a flaw? And the present timeline does culminate in the confrontation with his Mexican mother, and he kind of releases those years of pent up aggression and anger by having kind of a violent outburst with her. So the setting here takes place in a couple spots. The main area is the car, and it kind of functions as that liminal space, kind of bridging past and present, and childhood and adulthood, and kind of those conflicting identities that the narrator feels. He feels the chill of the air in the car, and it mirrors that emotional restraint. While movement without destination kind of symbolizes that unresolved transition that he feels between those moments in his life. So you have the Kansas City classroom, like I said, those mid-American areas, especially those affluent areas, and kind of show that racial isolation and early visibility where he's just not feeling seen as a person. The Mexican family setting kind of reflects those gender policing, cultural authority, where there's somebody that's higher up telling you how you should be, and that's just kind of coming down and culminating in these feelings of anger and kind of despair, where you're not belonging either. And then San Antonio becomes a space where these identities collide and can become re-examined in that kind of future tense where you're able to look back and hindsight sort of becomes 2020, and you're able to accept things as they are and kind of realize where you could have made some differences. So, a couple of characters here. You have the narrator, mixed black and Mexican male. It's calm and kind of reflective in adulthood, but emotionally restricted in memory. So, as he's younger, you kind of see those changes in how he feels. His anger manifests through stillness and silence until an emotional rupture occurs. The Mexican parent represents the cultural authority and masculinity reinforcement of how you should be as a man, while his partner in the car, provides grounding through presence and affirmation without performance. Um, and there are these main two forces that culminate in the explosion of anger and emotional release at the end of the story, but there's also several side characters that do play roles in the experience of our protagonist. So for the synopsis, it follows an adult narrator during a drive through San Antonio as the music on the car kind of awakens those memories in the past that we've kind of already discussed. The song shift between confidence and loneliness, prompting reflections on moments where his identity as a mixed black Mexican male was scrutinized or misunderstood. The most significant memory returns to a middle school relationship where a girl that uh, ends their relationship because of her father's racist tirade against her, where the narrator kind of feels singled out as he can't look and appear like the person her father wants him to be. As the drive does continue, the narrator recalls a more recent experience visiting his wife's family in Mexico, where ridicule is occurring over some of the clothing that he's wearing. It's a pink shirt, and he kind of is getting laughed at, and they're poking fun at him for wearing what he's wearing. And it shows and exposes those deeply ingrained expectations of masculinity and those situations that were reinforced by his mother. And so these overlapping memories build towards that confrontation of our protagonist, which kind of is our um, climax of the story. And after years of that contained frustration and anger, they surface during that exchange, and it marks a breaking point rather than a moment of reconciliation. The story concludes with not external validation from his partner, but with a quiet resolution. After that emotional outburst of confronting his mother about the control she kind of exhibited over his life, the narrator turns off the music and embraces the silence, which becomes a really important choice where he's able to make that decision of what he wants to do rather than have others dictate how he should or shouldn't be. And it kind of redefines how he carries that identity as he's going forward. So the story addresses themes of race and gender, masculinity, restraint, and especially emotionally. It focuses especially on those experiences of the mixed in identity individuals. And it kind of highlights how those social expectations and it shape their identity and their identity formation, really, and how reclaiming silence can sometimes function as a way to be empowered and to reclaim some of that which was lost. So some of the major scenes that are outlined here, you have the opening drive through San Antonio with music playing on the radio. You have the flashback to the ending of the first romantic relationship, brief memory of visiting family in Mexico and being ridiculed for non-traditional masculinity, present day verbal confrontation with the narrator's parent, and then resolution as the narrator turns off the music and sits in silence. So some of the symbolism here, music acts as an emotional trigger with songs representing loneliness or emotional armor, depending on the life stage. Silence symbolizes both oppression and the reclaimed agency that he had lost, throughout his life. And then the car represents that in between space, and the cold air reinforces that emotional suppression. These symbols repeat often and kind of amplify that conflict that's happening internally. So, purpose and impact here. The purpose of the story is to kind of explore how race and gender intersect in subtle but deeply impactful ways, especially those for the mixed individuals. Like I said, I feel like that's kind of one of those things that's on the rise. In America, you see a lot more. I have several family members that are both white and black, Mexican and white, Mexican and black. So it doesn't just fall there. There's a multitude of different cultural um, intersectionality that's happening. And it's kind of important to tell those stories so that those individuals feel seen and heard. And literature does provide a really unique space to be able to examine those experiences with nuance and emotional depth, and it allows the reader to engage with that complexity of those themes and stories without them having to be simplified for them. And so this story particularly aims to contribute to a broader conversation about representation and masculinity and identity by centering on a voice that often exists between categories. I feel like myself, I don't really fit between black or Mexican. I really do identify more in both spaces, but also in the higher educational space. So it's a little bit different for me in terms of where my family is, where I'm at, especially educationally. I'm a first generation graduate. I'll be graduating here on Monday. So it's important for me to kind of relay those bits of information that I received over my educational career and provide it to my family as they might not be or have the opportunities to be able to be where I'm at. Um, and by presenting anger, silence, and reflection without moralizing him, the story does invite readers, especially like high school students. I really feel like this story would be pertinent to them to see themselves in the narrator's struggle. And ultimately, the amplification of silence does affirm that being unapologetically oneself does reveal who is truly willing to stay in your life and who's going to be a meaningful person for your growth as an individual. That's my story. I'm really excited to present it to you, and I can't wait to hear your feedback on it. Thanks.